Time ago, I was taking a trip and I was on the road for quite some time. I was traveling alone, so I was trying to occupy my mind, and I began to do an analysis of the music I was hearing on the car radio when I was listening to a popular music station. And I was a little bit surprised to find out that out of the 12 songs I listened to, 8 of them were about having a broken heart. 2/3 of them were about having a broken heart. Now, if I'd been listening to a classical music station, I'm sure that would have been a different result. Or if I'd been listening to country western, I'm sure I would have heard about dogs and pickup trucks. But on the popular music station, 8 out of 12 songs, 2/3 of them were about having a broken heart. Or as Elvis said, "Since my baby left me, I found a new place to dwell. It's down at the end of Lonely Street, that heartbreak hotel." So much artistic energy. What does it mean? Is it just a manifestation of what one psychologist has called the great hormonal joke? That is, biological mechanisms by which we find a mate? Well, maybe, but I think there's something deeper involved here, and that is heartbreak is about being rejected in your utmost being. It cuts the core of who you are. It hurts to be rejected by someone else because your very self is taken down. Just ask teens. They would tell you that having a broken heart is one of the worst feelings that anybody could ever experience. Or ask a parent whose love for their children has been rebuffed by their child. They would tell you that a broken heart is about the worst kind of feeling you can have. Rejection of ourselves breaks the human heart, so that 8 out of 12 songs reflect that. Somebody's living at Heartbreak Hotel, and there are a lot of people dwelling there. As I look at the scriptures and the stories of God's attempts to reach out to human beings and extend God's self to his creatures, it seems to me that humanity has rejected God over and over, time and time again. As it says in the earlier chapters of the Gospel of John, he came to his own home, and his own people received him not. The door was slammed shut. Humanity has rejected God time and time again. And I have to wonder about God's heart and how broken-hearted God is when we reject God's overtures to us. All of the Old Testament is a series of narratives about God extending toward humanity and the people of God rejecting those overtures. In the wilderness, the Hebrew people constantly reject God and complain after they receive blessing after blessing. And during the period of the prophets, there are repeated patterns of people rejecting God's overtures, saying no to God. In the New Testament, we have poignant images, God sending his own Son, the incarnation, and Jesus heartbroken as he looks over Jerusalem. "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, killing the prophets and stoning those who are sent to you, how often I would have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you would not." A broken heart. When I think of the parable of the prodigal son, I think of God as the waiting father, waiting, and hoping that the children will respond. Now, this is not just an issue of the scriptures. It's not just an issue of history. Jesus looked people in the eye and asked for a response from them. And I believe God looks all of us in the eye and wants a response from us. So for the next few minutes, I'd like you to think about your own life. Think about the ways in which God has been reaching out to you in your own life. John Wesley referred to God's movement in our lives before we were aware of it as prevenient grace. God's grace that runs ahead of our own understanding of God's activity with us. Ask yourself, what has God done in your life that you may not have responded to. God has placed people in your life. Maybe there's a coworker or a relative like an aunt or an uncle or a neighbor who's been God's agent in your life, but you've rejected those overtures. Perhaps you've been blessed with opportunities in life and yet haven't responded with thankfulness to God. Many people look at their lives and all they see is a matter of chance. However, if we take a close look at our lives, we might God's hand weaving the threads that tie our lives together and call for a response. When you receive an invitation, often there are 4 letters at the bottom of the invitation, RSVP, which is an abbreviation of the French for please respond. And I believe that God wants us to respond to the overtures we receive in our life. And I believe that God is brokenhearted until we respond to God's outstretched arms. God's love is so great that it refuses to force itself upon us. It waits in patience. It waits in hope. And each of us has the capacity to ease God's heartbreak by responding to those outstretched arms. The truth is we need to respond because we're people with broken hearts, people who've been rejected by others, and we need to be received as God's children. As St. Augustine said in his prayer, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they find rest in thee."